Hey, welcome to day 3. This is my outline of what we're going to cover. We're going to look at filtering, aggregation, level of detail, actions, and parameters. And I will put this PDF down below as a link. I'll also add to it some links to URLs to Tableau help. Some of these examples are more in depth on my website, so I'll include those. And then as well, there's other videos that you might want to watch to learn a little bit more. But this is going to be very high level. We're just going to introduce you to these concepts, and then working with them, you'll get more experience if you follow some of the examples. So let's just dive right into filtering. Okay, so this is Tableau's website where the help file is talking about Tableau's order of operations. And this concept is very important if you're messing around with filters. It's how filters are applied. There's many different filters, as you can see here, and there's a specific order that Tableau uses. So the first is extract filters, then it applies data source filters, and next is context filters. Context filters are when you drag a field to the filter shelf, but then you specifically change it to be a context filter, and then it'll change to a gray background. So that's how you know you have a context filter in your view. After that, this little line on the side and then on the right shows that sets, conditional filters, top in, and fixed LOD, or level of detail, calculations are applied as filters. And so what that means is level of detail have 3 scoping keywords you can use. They're either fixed, include, or exclude. Now, after that, they apply dimension filters. And last time, I think we talked about the type of field is either dimension or measure. So a dimension would be categorical. So for instance, if you had state and the members of state would be Florida, New Jersey, Texas, something like that. After dimension filters, Tableau applies the include, exclude, LOD calculations and data blending. And data blending would be when you have 2 data sources and you combine them on a worksheet, then you set up data blending for those. After measure filters, Tableau applies forecasts, table calculations, clusters, and totals. And then table calculation filters are when you put a table calc field on the filter shelf. Those are applied next. And finally, trend lines and reference lines are applied at the very bottom. So just keep in mind, if your filters aren't working the way you expect, check out the Tableau order of operations. And one of the things I want to do here, because we have a lot to cover, is I'm going to use some notes from the book. And this is actually the ebook version, and it is in the Vital Source application. If you buy the book or you check it out from your library, it uses Vital Source for you to see it. And you can see here in Chapter 8, I do have an example of how Tableau applies filters. And there's a couple of these in the book. This one is talking about, you'll notice here on the filter shelf, I have fruit and the color, purple is set. And then fruit and color are dimension fields, and quantity is a measure field. Expect fruit to be applied, and then the color purple, and then finally quantity filter would be applied next. So this is just walking you through an example of how filters are applied. And I had mentioned that there will be links to additional exercises or videos. And this is actually my website where I have the top 3 filter to filter a range using a parameter. And if we go to that, you can see that this actually has the Tableau public file for you, and then the YouTube video that walks you through. This one has instructions. There's like a starter file with additional information you could download. And I'll put that link in the help file, the PDF. And then this is another example from the website. It also has a YouTube video, and it's walking you through the filter and sort in this video. And you can download the chart if you want to see it. The Tableau public file is also here. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see how it's arranged. And then next, I wanted to take a look at dates. Okay, so last time I think we briefly looked at a date field's context menu. And here I have the ship date field on the row shelf or something. And you can see the gray area has year, quarter, month, day, more. So those would be date parts. And then the bottom area in black has year, quarter, month, week number, day, more. And those are going to be date values. And I just wanted to briefly talk about what that difference would be. So let me go into a chart here that has an example. And dates are in chapter 9 in the book. And if I select this image here of two charts in the middle and then click on the ellipsis on the right, I can view the image and blow it up. And I think I mentioned that all the images in the book are vector, almost all of them anyway. So when you blow them up, they're going to be really crisp and clear. And so here on the left, I have a blue field indicating that this is a discrete choice. So that would be at the top of the context menus. And then on the right, this chart is using order date and it's green, meaning it's continuous. And the difference is that on the right, a continuous field would add an axis. So at the bottom here, you see it's a range. In the left chart, you'll notice 7, 10, and 12. So those are the hours, and it's showing those as headings because it's a discrete field. The blue field here on the column shelf is discrete. And so the 3.45 is actually two values combined into the 7 a.m. value, or 7 p.m. I don't know what that was. Anyway, so that's how those would work. It's explained in detail in the book in case you want to read it. There's other examples too in here that you can see where we're using date parts or date values and labels and all kinds of stuff like that. And I wanted to share this example of date granularity. This is from my Tableau public website. And you can see in the top right corner of this particular dashboard, I have a parameter control. We're going to get into parameters in just a minute. But here I have day, week, month. So if I switch around, let's go to day. You can see that the view is redrawn. And the way that that works is you have a parameter and then you have a calculated field. And so here is the actual workbook when I'm editing it. And you can see on the columns shelf, I have this order date, select date field. This is a calculated field I created. You can tell that because it has the equals sign in front of the little date icon. And if I were to edit it, I'm simply saying use the purple select date type parameter field and the order date. So I'm truncating them. And then that's on the column shelf. And then if you look and edit the parameter in the bottom left, I simply have a list of the different date values that I want to be able to pick from. And then I choose to display that parameter with this little parameter control up here in the top right. So that's how you could display that yourself and switch between dates. Okay, now we're going to look at table calculations. This is from chapter 10. And to begin with, I just wanted to show you that you can type your own table calculation as a calculated field and stuff, or you can use the option for quick table calculations where you right click on the field and at the bottom it's going to have a menu that says quick table calculations. And you can do things like here we see running total, percent difference from is a choice, the year to date total, a moving average. When you start editing your table calculation, depending on which one of these that you select, you have different choices. So here, if I was doing a rank calculation, I could choose descending or competition. So different values for ranks. The other thing is, as you're filling out your table calculation, you'll have an option for compute using. And that has to do with whether, let's say that you have 4 columns of data and 10 rows, and you're breaking it up by state. So you have the state of Florida is one pane, and then the state of Texas is the next pane. And so you can choose to, for instance, do a running total from left to right across the row, or you could do it down, which would be table down or pane down. And then you could do it, say, if you had divided up into 10 months or something, you could do the month of July going from the top down to the bottom, and then it would go up to the next column. And let me show you, there's some examples in this chapter of what I'm talking about. So here I have compute using table down, and this would be where on the left you can see the examples compute using table down here. Let me blow this up for you. Okay. And I'm saying in the year of 2020, I want you to start adding them from the top down. So when it gets to 395, that's actually where it added 1.35 and 2.60. And so if it's a running sum, it's 135 in August for cherry. It maintains that number. It's still 135. When it gets to September in Mango, now it's 260, added to 135, so now it's 395. So that's how it just keeps adding the numbers. And there's quite a few of these examples in there of the differences. It shows you the differences of working with panes also. So that would be table calculations. Okay, now I want to look at aggregation. So in chapter 3, we have this example from the book, and it's talking about how this is an aggregated measure field. So I have online sales aggregated as sum, and it's on my column shelf. And you'll notice on the bottom, it says the axis is labeled online sales, and it runs from 0 to 300. And then I have the in-store sales on my rows shelf, and that's creating a vertical axis here. And that one runs from 0 to 400. Now I have 2 marks on this chart because I have the type field over here on the color tile of the marks card. And so there just happen to be 2 types. One is for apples and one is for oranges. So if you were going to read this, you would say, where does the axis intersect? And that's where this mark or dot would be, which I've color-coded to be either orange or red. Now, if it wasn't aggregated, this is what the chart would look like. It's the same chart, but I've simply turned off aggregation. So I'm no longer saying I want you to sum all the orange values. I'm just saying show me every individual value. So you can see all the different circles. There's quite a few here. So this is what it would look like if it wasn't aggregated. Now when we looked at the measure aggregations, by default Tableau uses sum. But you can also have dimension aggregations. So you can see here you could use attribute count. That would be kind of like counting the number of rows, the minimum or the maximum. If you're using a date field as a dimension, the maximum date, that kind of thing. And then for your measure aggregations here, you see you could have sum, average, count again, minimum, maximum. So there's different things that you can do aggregation-wise depending on the type of field that you have. Now we're going to look at the level of detail for the view. So I'm going to take region from the data pane on the left, and I'm going to add that to my view. Then I'm going to grab state, and I'm going to put sales on the text tile. So now you can see the most granular level here is state or province. I can see that Illinois had 667,000 something. Illinois happens to be in the central region. If I wanted to know what percentage that state sales were for the entire region, I need to know what the central region entire value is. And so that's a different level of detail than what I'm seeing in the view. If I were to take state or province off, now I can see that number, but I want to make it available to me when I do have state or province still in my view. So in order to do that, we're going to create a calculated field. So this is an example from chapter 11 in the book. And it's showing you I have a couple measure fields up here. And I want to know what are the total sales for the state of Alberta. Over here, I see that I have a field called total state sales. That's going to be a level of detail calculated field. And it's 11,460. Now, just because I happen to have the sum of sales up here on the column shelf, I can see that sales is orange, and that's represented for calligraphy here. And then within the tooltip on the bottom right, it says that sales is 10,972. So because I have both of those values available to me, I can figure out the percent of total sales. And in this chapter, we do show you what the level of detail expressions are and how you would build them out. When you're making your calculated field that has a level of detail expression, there's certain syntax that you have to use. There's a scoping keyword. So there's 3 different choices. It's exclude if you want to take certain fields out. In our earlier example up here, I wanted to say I need total sales, so I want to take city out of my level of detail view, if you will. And then you can also do fixed, where you say I'm going to give you the fields and that's all you're going to use, period. And then you can do include, where you're actually adding in a field that's not part of the view right now, but you want to be more granular. And then the syntax of the way that the expression is actually created. Here I'm showing you in topic 11.12.1.3 include. I'm using the include scoping keyword. I'm saying I want you to include the zip field, so I'm adding that in to my existing view. And then the calculation that I want to do, I say colon, and then the calculation would be average. And then here the field is fans. So let me show you that. This is going to be part of the handout. Now in today's handout, I do have another example of the LOD declaration. It begins with curly braces. And so here in the example that's green. And then it has your scoping keyword, which is fixed. Your dimension declaration part of the expression is the dimension fields. So I'm using state and county here separated by a comma. Then you have your colon. And then on the right side of your expression, you have your aggregate expression. And here I'm using sum of the field sales. So that's my entire LOD calculation, and it would be inside of the calculated field. Now, there are two examples here. Let's look at the first one. These are on my website. And you can actually watch the video on the website, or you can open it full screen. And then if you scroll down, you can see the Tableau public file. Again, you can use it right here on the website, or you can go download it. And the advantage is if you go and download the solution, then you can actually see the fields. So here I am on Tableau public, and I'm going to edit. I have to sign in, sorry, so I can edit it and show you how it looks. Okay. Once you're signed in to Tableau Public, you can use the Edit button. And then you can go to that field by opening up the worksheet. And now you can see the fields that are on the marks card. And let's see, over here I have my percent of hours, my employee total hours. This is an LOD field. So let me show you what it looks like. Here you can see the braces. I'm going to zoom in on that for you. A little bit bigger. I have the braces. I'm using the exclude scoping keyword. My dimension field is task, and then I'm doing sum of hours. So you can just open it up and see how these are created and get a little bit better feel for it. And then there's another one here. This is the level of detail expressions for fans of restaurants. So I'll show you that one. So here you have your YouTube video, and then down at the bottom you have your actual fans. And this would be fans of restaurants. So people that are fans of the Jeremiah's ice cream, or fans of the restaurant Cooper's Hawk. And then I have labels here that explain the different LOD calculations. And then I also have a tooltip. So as you move your mouse over that particular chart, you're going to see the tooltip values. Now, before we get into the calculation editor, I wanted to look at the mathematical order of operations in Tableau. It uses the same one as normal math. So elements in parentheses are done first, then exponents, then division and multiplication, and last is addition and subtraction. Now, an example of that here would be this 2 plus 10 is in parentheses. So Tableau would calculate that first, and then it would do the division, which is divide by 6 at the end. So just keep that in mind when you're working with things. And let's go in and look at the calculation editor briefly. So you have normal operators. The exclamation equals is going to be not. The equals returns a Boolean, so it would be either true or false if it's an equal. And then equals is just a test to say the state is equal to Florida or something like that. And then you also have your greater thans or less thans. You can use parentheses. Your logical statements are and. So if you were trying to say the state is Florida and the country is USA, something like that, you can also use or, not, or in. So those are other ways that you could do calculations. Let's look at this live because I want to show you the calculation editor. So if I'm making a new calculation in the data pane at the left, I can choose create calculated field from the drop-down menu. And I'm just going to call this a test calc field. And you'll notice that Tableau opened up a gray area on the right. And this is kind of like the help for your calculation editor. So at the top, there's a drop-down list, and this is the categories of help that you can get, the functions. So for instance, if I choose string, you'll notice that I have an option for left, there's a right, there's mid, that kind of thing. And it also gives you an example of the syntax for that function, what you should enter in there. If you wanted to work with dates, it'll show you what the date add does, an example of it down here. And it just makes it really easier to figure out how to do your calculations. Now, what I would like to do here is I'm going to show you what happens when I enter a bad calculation. So I'm going to do concatenate a string. So I'm going to say combine this string. And you'll notice in the bottom left in red, it says the calculation contains an error. I'm going to go ahead and actually, it doesn't really care if you have it on a couple lines, so I'm going to spread it out just to make this an easier example. So you'll notice that within the body of the calculation, it did give me a warning message, and it also has a little red squiggly line underneath where there's a problem. So normally when I'm combining strings, you need to put them inside of quotes, and it can be single quotes or double quotes, but you can't mix a double quote and a single quote. So that's why I'm getting an error on that line around the word this. Now you'll notice that I'm getting a little red squiggly line over or underneath my S. And the reason for that is that I forgot to put the plus symbol. If I click on the calculation contains error, it'll actually give you a clue. So here it's saying it's a syntax error, you forgot a missing operator. So I need to come back up here and use a plus. Now it's going to say there's another error. And so as you're working and fixing things, you're going to get different things highlighted and different errors. It'll walk you through every single error. So here it's saying it's a reference to an undefined field or string. So it doesn't understand that this is supposed to be a string here. So I can just put quotes around it, and now it changes and says the calculation is valid. Let's say that instead of this phrase string, I wanted to use something from one of my fields. And I know over here in the data pane on the left that the ABC would be string fields. So if I was to drag, for instance, the region field over and drop it in my calculation, you see there's a tiny orange arrow pointing to where it's going to put that field. Now, when you drag fields in, they're going to be orange. If you have parameters, those parameter fields would be purple. And so it'll give you color coding, if you will. So let's say that I wanted to make this region field uppercase. I could go into my strings on the right, and I could look down for the function upper. And over here, it'll say, okay, upper parentheses, put your string in quotes and close parentheses. So if I wanted to start doing that here, as I begin typing upper, you'll notice that Tableau is filling out that function name for me. Then I just need to wrap it in parentheses. And that's how I would say change the field value to uppercase. Now, functions are blue when you're working the editor. And then, as I said before, your field is going to be orange. So that's how you could work with calculated fields. It's really handy to remember that you can come down on the arrow in the bottom left and click within the calculated syntax of the calculated field, because if you want to find, within 10 rows of data, where's the mistake, it'll tell you that. And it'll often position that little red squiggly line either before or after the error, depending. So you want to look on both sides if you see that to see, where's the syntax wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and go with this. And I just wanted to show you briefly, if you're formatting dates, it can be a little bit of a challenge. So I'm going to drag the order date over here and drop it on the row shelf. By default, it's selected year. You'll notice this is a blue field, meaning it's discrete. And so it gave me headers here in my view for year of order date. Now, what I want to do here is I want to select, say, month. It's still blue because it's still a discrete field, but it has changed a little bit. Now it says month, and then in parentheses, it says order date. And it's interesting here, in case you wanted to combine, say, the 3 letters of the month, and you're using the calculated field as a custom field, you can't really do that using those drop-down format choices, but you can do it if you edit it and look and make a calculated field based on the syntax. So if I go into month, and I come down and I say at the very bottom, edit in shelf, it actually shows you the calculation that makes it be a month. So it's going to use date part, and then it's going to give it month is the date part you're looking for. It can be like month or day. And then it's the field name. So if I go back in and I edit my test field over here in the data pane on the left, I'm just going to say edit. I could actually type that syntax in, and I can look up what date part does. If I just click within the function name date part on the right, it tells me what to expect here. It has a little example. And the date parts, I always have to look them up, but it's stuff like day, month, year you could use. And as long as the calculation is valid, it'll say that in the bottom left corner of your calculation window. And so now, if I replace that month of order date with my field that I made, which is called test calc field, I can just drop it on top of there. And now you can see it's actually showing me the month as a number because that's what the date part was doing. And there, you can choose to display numbers or text like JAN for January. So the different functions that relate to dates, you can use those to build out a string of the way you want your date to appear. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you there. And then I want to show you an aggregation error. So in the book in chapter 11, I have some examples of things that go wrong, what can happen in calculation fields. And so this one, your 11.4 figure, is an aggregation error. And you'll notice that I'm using comments. Whoops, sorry, let me open this up a little bit bigger. So the // at the beginning indicates that this is going to be a comment, and it's gray whenever you do that. And then the AVG function with the parentheses is wrapped around count D of the product name field, and Tableau is saying you can't do that. And under the red error, it says the argument to average is an aggregate function, and it's already an aggregation, so you can't further aggregate it. So it's kind of like warning you can't combine average with count D. Now, if you close this, let's go look at ways to fix that. One way is this average calc field I created. And here, this is the level of detail calculation. You'll notice that it has the fixed, so the squiggly brace at the beginning before the word fixed, and then it ends in the blue squiggly line. That's all wrapped within parentheses because then I want to divide it by 3. There happen to be 3 rows for these orders. And so that would be the equivalent of getting an average. And I just wanted to show you that's one way you could work with multiple aggregations. Now, the other thing that you can do, and it's very common, is it'll warn you when you're mixing aggregations. So let's look at this example. So, or this calculated field, I'm doing the sum of total state sales, which is an aggregation, and then I'm doing sales over here on the right, and that is not aggregated. So it's saying you can't do that. And one of the ways you can get around that is using the attribute function around sales, and then it would accept it as being valid. So sometimes you'll run into that also. And here in the book, I do explain use aggregate instead. It doesn't always let you use attribute depending on where you put your calculation. Because remember, we can have calculations in filters and sets, all kinds of places. And so if it doesn't like attribute, another thing you might try is minimum, MIN, or max. And it would accept that sometimes instead of just doing the attribute. Now, I wanted to say, if you make a mistake in your calculated field and you don't notice it, when you look in the data pane on the left here, you'll see that there's a red exclamation. That can happen. It can also turn the background to red for the field, indicating there's something wrong with it. And in this particular example, there's a pound sign indicating it defaulted to a number field, and it has the little equals in front of the sign so that you know that this is a calculated field I created. If I edit this and I just add anything like the number, actually I think I'll make it a string. I'll make it the string called 9. Now it says in the bottom left corner of the calculation window that it's valid, and that error message goes away. Now, as you scroll up, now in the data pane, it moved, so it thinks it's a dimension. It's above this little line here, and it has equals ABC. So I just wanted to point out that when you make fields, they can return true or false. They can return equals. The symbol will be a TF if it's a Boolean for true, false. This little world globe indicates that this particular field is a geospatial field. Then I have a date type field. So these are your different types that are returned, and even your calculations are going to be assigned to a type, the ones that you create. Now, when you're working on your view, and you can see I have this test calc field here, and I'm going to edit it. Okay, now I'm going to add my test calc field to my view. And then in the data pane on the left, I'm going to choose to edit it. And I want to change it now. Let's see, it says combine this central. So I'm going to put a space there. And I wanted to show you what will happen as you work in your calculated field. So let's say I change this to be a new string called just any old thing. And in the view, if I click on apply, the apply button, notice that the view changes. And now it's displaying combine this region, the new text that I've created. So if you're working on something and you want to see how does it affect the value in the view, the calculation, whatever you're doing, you can use your little apply button. And then if you don't like it, in the top left corner of Tableau, arrow, you can use the arrow for undo or redo. So you can move back and forth as you tweak your calculation. Let's look at some of Tableau's interactivity. We're going to look at actions, tooltips, and parameters. Tableau can also do highlighting, where if you have a couple charts on one dashboard and you click on one item in a chart, it'll highlight corresponding items in another chart. Tableau also has hierarchies, which is where you can group your fields. So it's kind of like a drill down. You'd have one, say, topic at the state level, and then under that you would have a field that would be cities, and then under that you might have neighborhoods or something. But they're a drill down, they're related to each other. In this filter action topic, I have 4 examples that show you how to use filter actions. So one is a pop-out chart, another is a reset all filters button, and then there's one that says filter a dashboard when certain data points are selected. So just some ideas of things you might use to do a filter action. I mentioned highlight actions earlier. There's also a go to URL action, and here I have it using the state field to open up Google and go right to South Carolina, which happens to be selected in the state field. I wanted to show you there's also an email URL link, since technically mail to is actually just a URL. So here's the syntax for mail to, the email name, you can put the subject in there and that sort of thing. And then there's also go to sheet actions with a tooltip. You can put it here in the bottom. I have it inside of the tooltip where I embedded the sheet name. Here I have it where I've embedded the sheet name inside of the tooltip, and I use the insert button to do that. Or you could make the sheet action, go to sheet action. And that is where you say, okay, I'm on this particular sheet. If you click on the menu, then I want you to open up the state sheet. So you can display it in the tooltip, another sheet, or you could actually move to that other worksheet if you wanted to. And keep in mind that actions are available for dashboards or for worksheets. Another action is to change a parameter. I have an example of the change parameter action in the outline with the links that I'm going to give you down below. And basically for that, you would display your parameter control. I'd like to show you the change parameter action. So in this particular dashboard, you see I have sales, price, and quantity at the top of the dashboard, and then underneath it I have bar charts. So those are 2 different worksheets. And the way that I'm going to use the parameter is, let me show you that real quick. It's called choose field to sort parameter, and it just simply has sales, quantity, and price. So this is going to be a string parameter. And then the action itself is down here. And this parameter action is called update sort parameter. And it's going to act whenever they use the text worksheet at the top of the dashboard. And then it's going to be when they hover over it. Then this action will change. And it's called dynamic zone action. It's on dashboard 1, and it's based on sales by category. And then it targets the hide zone with parameter, which is a true false Boolean. And that's based on when they do the menu choice. And then to test this action and see it working, in the testing section, I say display the parameter, here it is on the right, and choose false. And then you only see the one chart on the left. And then if you want to see both charts, then you would change the parameter to true. And then that demonstrates that you would see them both. Now, normally I would hide the parameter control because what I wanted it to do was when you click on a bar, I want you to show the subchart. So that's actually what it would do in the end state. But for testing, it's fun to have the parameter there. Now the outline that I'm going to put down below has these links to other exercises. So for example, let's look at Apply Filters button with actions. So if I was to open that up, this is on my website, and you can see here it's got the actual worksheet that you can download and a YouTube video. So the Tableau public would be the file if you want to see how it works, and then the video if you want to follow along and create it yourself. And so if you'd like to see more examples, you can just follow those in the outline. Thanks for joining. Bye.